Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to this course on conditioning program designing. This is lecture 3 of week 1, wherein we will be covering the topic improving the efficiency of the aerobic system. I am Colonel Dr. Anup Krishnan, and I will take you through this lecture. I'll be covering the topic as per the following outline: definition, introduction and review, determinants, adaptations to aerobic training, training principles, training methods, practical applications, and as usual, we will conclude with a take-home message. The learning objectives of this lecture are to define determinants of aerobic performance, namely VO2 max, lactate threshold, and running economy. Distinguish between the central and the peripheral adaptations. Evaluate the training approaches, LIT, tempo, HIIT, polarized, etc. Apply evidence-based periodization and integrate nutrition and recovery. Let's talk about the aerobic system. The aerobic system is a biological system wherein ATP is produced in the presence of oxygen via mitochondria. The primary fuels for this are carbohydrates and fat. And improved efficiency means sustained ATP is produced with minimal fatigue. Now, I would like to elaborate a bit further. When we talk about aerobic system or aerobic training, what we are trying to do normally is the fuel for aerobic training normally is carbohydrates. However, the amount of carbohydrates present in the body is limited. What we are trying to do with endurance training or aerobic system training is we are trying to convert a carbohydrate burning individual we are trying to convert an individual who burns carbohydrates as fuel and make his body burn fat as fuel to produce ATP. Because unlike carbohydrates, fat stores are present in a large amount in the human body. And this is what we mean by sustained ATP production with minimal fatigue. There are some determinants of aerobic efficiency. VO2 max. Higher the VO2 max, higher the aerobic efficiency. Lactate threshold. Now, lactate threshold, I'll be discussing it a bit more in a future slide, so I will keep it for that. Now, lactate threshold, we are measuring it as a fraction of the VO2 max. I'll explain better in a later slide. We also determine aerobic efficiency by something called movement economy or the energy cost per unit. And we are looking at something called substrate flexibility. Now, what does this mean? This means I am running a long distance race. When I start the race, I am burning carbohydrate. When I get into the aerobic phase, I should start burning fat. Towards the end of the race, when I start to sprint to finish the race, my body will switch from fat burning and back to carbohydrate burning. And more importantly, because I'm sprinting, this carbohydrate will be from the glycogen stores. This is what is called substrate flexibility. There are some central and peripheral adaptations to aerobic conditioning or aerobic In the central adaptations, you have improvement in cardiac output, variations in blood volume, and improvement in pulmonary diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. In the peripheral adaptations, you have an increase in the number of mitochondria, increase in the number and size of capillaries, and increase in oxidative enzymes. And all this combined will result in higher oxygen delivery and utilization. Let's talk about the mitochondrial adaptations. So, there is increased mitochondrial density and increase in the number of the oxidative enzymes such as citrate synthetase and succinate dehydrogenase. Now, technically speaking, citrate synthetase is not an oxidative enzyme, but is a marker for increased mitochondrial density. If citrate synthetase concentration increases, it means that there is an increase in the mitochondrial density. This will improve something called oxidative phosphorylation, and there will be an enhanced fat oxidation capacity, meaning the individual will switch from carbohydrate burning to fat burning. There are some adaptations to the cardiovascular system. There will be an increase in stroke volume and there will be cardiac hypertrophy, more seen in the left ventricle. There will be an increase in plasma volume and in hemoglobin mass. And there will be an increase in the capillary density for extraction of the oxygen. The metabolic and substrate adaptations are enhanced fat oxidation capacity, we have seen that. There will be greater glycogen storage and there will be improved metabolic flexibility. So, the body has basically, it means the body is like a flex fuel engine. A flex fuel engine can burn petrol, ethanol, CNG or a combination of all of the above. Similarly, if you undergo aerobic training, the body can burn carbs, fat, some amount of protein or a combination of all of the above. And this is what I mean by improved metabolic flexibility. Neuromuscular and biomechanical economy. So basically, if you undergo aerobic training, the motor unit recruitment becomes more efficient. That means when you are exercising, your body pulls in a particular number of motor units. As the load increases, more and more number of motor units are recruited. If you are exercising regularly and continuously, the motor unit recruitment is more efficient. The tendon stiffness increases and elastic energy return will improve. It is like a catapult. Okay? If the elastic band is thicker, it has got more stiffness, the elastic energy return will be more. If you do proper technique and strength training, you will be able to improve your running and biomechanical economy. There are some training principles which you are supposed to follow, such as specificity, progressive overload, individualization, variation, and recovery. Specificity means targeted training for specific goal. Progressive overload, you have to gradually increase the training intensity. The training has to be tailored to the personal needs and there has to be a variation in the exercises which you give daily. More important, give adequate rest for adaptation and recovery. Let's talk about some training methods. Low intensity training, training at low intensity. Tempo training, threshold training. Now, this is training at the lactate threshold. I'll be discussing this further. We'll talk about this in a subsequent slide. High intensity interval training, polarized training and pyramidal training. In polarized training, exercises will alternate between low intensity and high intensity. There will be no moderate intensity exercises. The training will alternate between low intensity and high intensity exercises. In pyramidal training, you will start with low intensity, you make a pyramid. You will go up to moderate intensity and you will ultimately go to high intensity. Now, these are the two different types of polarized training and pyramidal training. Okay. You also have something called cross training and strength training. Cross training is basically you try and utilize or train some muscle groups which have not been trained regularly. For example, a swimmer who's in a training program, you put him into playing tennis for some time. A tennis player, you put him into running for some time. This is what is called cross training. Low intensity training. You train at 50 to 75% of HR max and make sure that the pace maintained is a conversational pace. That means train at an intensity wherein you can complete a full sentence while training. This stimulates the mitochondria, the capillaries and the plasma volume. And this is the foundation for how a higher intensity tolerance. Tempo or threshold training. What we are doing basically is making the individual train near the lactate threshold. This will enhance the lactate clearance and the lactate tolerance, and the individual will be able to improve the race pace. Now, how does this work? Now, this is a graph which shows the blood lactate level versus time and heart rate on this axis. All right. Normal blood lactate level is between 0.8 to 1.2 millimoles per liter. Now, what we do to accurately measure lactate threshold is you make the individual do a graded exercise program on a treadmill or on an exercise cycle or anything where you can increase the exercise intensity. You do it every 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes, when you increase the exercise intensity, you take blood from the athlete's fingertip for blood lactate estimation. You continue doing this. There will come a time when the blood lactate will rise up and then go back to the baseline. This is called lactate threshold 1. After some time, there will come a time when the blood lactate will rise and the linearity will continue to rise, or there will be a break in the linearity of this graph. Now, this by itself is fine, but it does not give you training data. So, what you do when you are measuring the load, when you are measuring the lactate, you also measure the heart rate. You drop a line from the lactate threshold to the heart rate, and this will give you your heart rate training zone at lactate threshold. Now this is what you mean by threshold training, etc. I hope I'm clear with this, and I hope the concept has been understood by each one of you, right? So lactate threshold is the point when the lactate graph breaks the linearity and continues to rise. This is also called LT2. When you drop or measure it against the heart rate, it will give you a heart rate training zone, which is easy for the coach and the athlete to follow. High intensity interval training. Short bursts at 85 to 100% of VO2 max. This boosts the VO2 max and mitochondrial biogenesis. It improves repeatability and also improves anaerobic capacity. So this is one of the few training methods which improves aerobic as well as anaerobic capacity. What are the HIIT protocols or examples? So you do 4 reps of 4-minute runs at 90 to 95% of HR max with a 3-minute rest period. Or you do 6 30-second all-out sprints with 4-minute rest. You may also do something called cruise intervals near the lactate threshold. These are the 3 different methods by which you can do HIIT training. There are different various other protocols which exist, but these are some of the ones which I wanted to elucidate. Polarized training model. Now we talked about polarized training. Jumps between low intensity and high intensity. So 80% low intensity, 20% high intensity, and minimal time in the moderate zone. However, please note that this is to be used mainly in elite endurance athletes. And please do not use this polarized training model in athletes who are just starting out. Fartlek and sport specific work. Basically, it is a mix of continuous and interval training. You can use this for simulation of race or game pace changes, and it is useful for endurance and team sports. If you look at it, it is basically an alternating fast and slow training periods, right? Strength and plyometric training. Now we are talking about aerobic conditioning. However, we also should be training the strength and the plyometric component, because heavy resistance training improves the neuromuscular recruitment and improves the recruitment of the motor units. Plyometrics enhance the stretch shortening cycle, and this will improve the running and the cycling economy. We may also use some environmental and other strategies to improve aerobic training. You can do something called altitude training. You can take the athlete to high altitude, which will increase the red cell mass, or you can put the athlete in something called a hypoxic chamber, which will simulate the high altitude effects at sea level. We must also do something called heat acclimatization if the event which the athlete is preparing for is going to be held in a hot climatic area. This will increase the plasma volume. And please understand that you must do cross training to reduce mechanical stress. All the training you do is of no use if you do not focus on the nutrition. Adequate carbohydrates to support the intensity. 1.4 to 1.8 gram per kg per day of protein to support the training load and for recovery and repair of the muscles. Again, for oxygen transport and good quality hydration, which will support the plasma volume. Recovery and load management, again very important. Make sure your athlete is getting 7 to 9 hours per night of sleep. Active recovery supports the circulation. There are various methods of active recovery such as long, slow run, massage, cryotherapy, etc., etc. How will you monitor? You will monitor that the athlete is properly recovered by HRV, resting heart rate and wellness scores. And please plan for deload weeks in the training program. There is something called a recovery pyramid which you should be using for training your athlete. More sleep and downtime. Focus on nutrition and hydration. Use recovery aids such as cold, hot and contrast water immersion. Use recovery aids such as compression, active recovery or stretching. Use massage. Use cryo chambers, EMS or vibration, and be aware or wary about recovery fads. So use more of the items which are towards the bottom of the pyramid and use the items towards the top of the pyramid less or not at all. When you are training somebody for aerobic conditioning, make sure you monitor the VO2 max and the lactate profile in the laboratory. On field, you can use time trials and critical power tests. Daily monitor the HRV, the GPS load and the RPE. We'll talk about a sample 12-week program. Week 1 to 4, focus on LIT, maybe one session of threshold training and focus on strength. Here, the motor quality is strength, endurance, and not pure strength. Week 5 to 8, add HIT and tempo training because the athlete has already reached a particular level. Week 9 to 11, increase the HIT but reduce the volume. Week 12, because you are close to the competition, start tapering, reduce the volume but keep the intensity. Now, this is just a sample of how you plan a 12-week program for aerobic conditioning. There are so many ways to do it. I am just suggesting one way to do it. So let's talk about a competitive cyclist who is a 28-year-old athlete with a VO2 max of 58 and a lactate threshold which is on the weaker side. How will we improve his training? Polarized training, threshold training and HIIT. Now in this case, if you want to improve his lactate threshold, we will have to give him 2 or 3 sessions of threshold training per week. Start with 1 session and gradually progress to 3 sessions over a week. Monitor the power output, HRV and fatigue, and If you are able to do this properly, give him a well-designed training program, monitor his rest and recovery, you will be able to improve his race power and economy. Right, let's come to the take-home message. So we all know proper conditioning is vital for modern sport. Always start with general conditioning to improve fitness. Focus on a specific conditioning program as per the requirement of the sport. Integrate into the training program. Integrate multiple types of conditioning. You cannot only focus on aerobic, anaerobic, strength, stretching, flexibility, etc. Sport-specific training program design is vital as each sport has different motor qualities. These are my references, ladies and gentlemen. Kindly go through them in the interest of better understanding. I seem to have finished, ladies and gentlemen. This brings us to the end of lecture 3 of week 1. Thank you for your listening. Thank you and Jai Hind.